The laughter in the back room of the Chinatown Social Club is loud, abrasive, and smells of cheap pride. It is a humid Tuesday night in San Francisco, 1964, and the air is so thick with the scent of stale tobacco and heavy jasmine tea that you can almost taste the tension. In the center of the room stands Miller, a 230-pound longshoreman with fists the size of mallets and a reputation for breaking things that don't want to be broken. He is looking down at a young man in a plain black t-shirt, and he is laughing because he thinks he's found a toy to play with. He calls the young man a fancy dancer. He calls him a showman. To Miller, and to the crowd of traditionalists gathered in the shadows, this young man, Bruce, is nothing more than a collection of fast words and flashy movements that wouldn't last a minute on the docks. The room is cramped, the walls are yellowed from years of smoke, and the only light comes from a few low-hanging bulbs that cast long, flickering shadows. Everyone here thinks they know how this ends. They think the big man is about to crush the little man. But watch the clock. In exactly 1 second, the hierarchy of this room will be dismantled. In exactly 1 second, this massive longshoreman will be on his knees, gasping for air he cannot find, convinced he has been cheated by some kind of dark magic. That 1 second is the only window Bruce needs to destroy a lifetime of street-fighting ego. It is a moment that will be whispered about in martial arts circles for decades, not because of a flying kick or a cinematic punch, but because of a grip so fast and a physics so pure that the human eye literally misses the moment the battle is won. The 1 second starts soon, but to understand why it happens, you have to understand the silence that preceded it. San Francisco in the mid-60s wasn't the city of tech giants and glass towers we know today. It was a city of grit, of docks, and of deeply guarded secrets. In Chinatown, the martial arts scene was a closed world. There were rules. There was a way things were done. You respected your elders, you practiced your forms, and you didn't challenge the status quo. Then came Bruce. He didn't care about the forms, he didn't care about the history if it didn't work in a dark alley. He was loud, he was confident, and to the men in this room, he was dangerous because he was different. Miller represents everything the old world believed in. He is raw power. He is the guy who wins because he is bigger, because he hits harder, and because he is willing to take a punch to give one. He stands there with his chest puffed out, sweating through his shirt, enjoying the audience. He thinks the young man's silence is fear. He thinks the way Bruce is standing, relaxed, hands down, looking almost bored, is a sign of weakness. It wasn't fear. It was economy. The tension rises when Miller decides he's had enough of the talking. He steps forward, his boots heavy on the wooden floor, and tries to shove Bruce. It's a move designed to humiliate, to knock the smaller man off balance and show the room who owns the space. But Bruce doesn't flinch. He doesn't even move his feet, he just pivots his hip an inch, a microscopic adjustment that makes Miller's hand slide off his shoulder like water off a stone. The room goes quiet. The laughter stops. Miller's face turns a deep shade of red. He feels the embarrassment of missing a target that was standing right in front of him. He clears his throat, his ego bruised, and prepares to actually swing. But before he can, Bruce speaks. His voice is calm, low, and completely devoid of the anger Miller is radiating. He makes a deal. He tells Miller he won't even punch him. He tells the big man that he will simply touch him once. The skeptics in the back lean in. They think they are about to see a fraud exposed. To them, martial arts is about the exchange of blows, the endurance of pain, the long struggle. This claim of a single touch ending a fight sounds like the tall tales of a street magician. Miller, sensing a chance to regain his dignity, mocks the offer. He thinks it's a trick to avoid a real fight. He thinks the kid is scared of getting hit. But then comes the part nobody expects. Bruce asks Miller to grab his lead hand. He tells him to squeeze it as hard as he can. He offers his forearm like a peace offering, a bridge between their two worlds. Miller smiles. This is his territory. He spent his days hauling crates and his nights in bars. His grip strength is legendary. He reaches out and wraps a massive, calloused hand around Bruce's wrist and forearm. He squeezes until his own knuckles turn white. He is looking Bruce in the eye, waiting for the wince, waiting for the sign of pain that will signal his victory. He thinks he has him. He thinks the fight is over before it began because he has the smaller man pinned. It is an irreversible trap. But Miller doesn't realize he's the one inside it. The 1 second starts now. As Miller squeezes with everything he has, Bruce's forearm doesn't feel like flesh and bone anymore. To Miller, it suddenly feels like a steel cable under tension. Bruce doesn't pull away. Most people, when grabbed, try to retreat. They try to create distance. Bruce does the opposite. He moves deeper into the grip. He relaxes his shoulder, letting his center of gravity drop an inch, and for a heartbeat, Miller feels like he's trying to hold onto a mountain. Then, with a microscopic flick of the wrist, a movement so small it's almost invisible to the people standing 3 feet away, Bruce initiates a sudden seizure of the nervous system. He isn't using muscle. He's using alignment. He's using the very pressure Miller is applying against him. In that 1 second, Miller's balance evaporates. It's not that he's being pushed. It's that the ground feels like it has vanished beneath him. His own strength, his massive 230-pound frame, is turned into a vacuum that sucks the air out of his lungs. His nervous system shorts out. The brain sends a signal to hold on, but the body receives a shock that tells it to collapse. The room freezes. The sound of Miller's knees hitting the floorboards is like a gunshot in the small space. He isn't yelling. He isn't fighting back. He is just there on the ground, clutching his wrist and staring up at Bruce with a mix of genuine terror and absolute confusion. He looks like a man who just saw a ghost. He looks like a man who realized everything he knew about the world was wrong. "You cheated!" someone yells from the back. The voice is shaky, defensive. "You used a trick. That's not a fight." They call it cheating because they cannot comprehend the economy of motion. They see a result without seeing the work. They see the collapse, but they didn't see the years of training that allowed a human being to condense a lifetime of power into a single second of contact. They see a fancy dancer who just brought a giant to his knees without breaking a sweat, and their brains struggle to process the reality of what just happened. To the traditionalists in the room, power is something you build up and release. It's a scream, a wide swing, a display of effort. To Bruce, power is the absence of wasted energy. It is the ability to be soft until the moment you need to be hard, and then to become soft again. But Bruce doesn't gloat. He doesn't stand over Miller and brag. He doesn't look at the crowd and demand their respect. Instead, he does something that leaves the room even more unsettled than the fight itself. He reaches down, places a hand on Miller's shoulder, the same shoulder Miller tried to shove moments ago, and helps him up. He doesn't break the man's spirit. He breaks his misunderstanding of power. He leans in and explains almost gently that tension is a cage. Miller was his own jailer. The harder he squeezed, the easier he was to break. The more he relied on his size, the more he became a victim of his own weight. Years later, those who were in that room didn't talk about the fight. They didn't talk about the technique or the specific grip. They talked about the silence that followed. They talked about the way the air in the room seemed to change, shifting from the smell of tobacco and aggression to something cleaner, something sharper. They realized they hadn't witnessed a street fight. They had witnessed an evolution. But as Miller stands up, dusting off his trousers, the resentment in the room hasn't fully vanished. The cheating accusation still hangs in the humid air. The traditionalists aren't ready to accept that their way is becoming obsolete. They see Bruce's mercy as another form of arrogance. They don't realize that the 1 second was just the beginning. There is a storm coming to Chinatown, and it doesn't look like a mountain. It looks like a man who knows how to disappear while standing right in front of you. As Bruce turns to leave, Miller is still staring at his own hands, wondering how they failed him. He's wondering how a man half his size could make him feel so small. And in the shadows of the Sun Sing Social Club, the elders are beginning to realize that the rules they've lived by for centuries are about to be rewritten by a man who refuses to follow any rules at all. The word cheated is a desperate shield. It is what people say when their reality has been fractured and they aren't ready to accept the new pieces. In that cramped back room in San Francisco, the air is vibrating with that desperation. The traditionalists, the men who have spent decades perfecting rigid stances and choreographed patterns, are staring at Miller on the floor. They aren't looking at Bruce as a master. They are looking at him as a thief who just stole the dignity of a man twice his size. But watch the clock. We are still within the echoes of that 1 second. The world hasn't moved on yet, even if the physics of the room has shifted forever. Miller is breathing in short, ragged bursts. His hand, that massive tool of labor that has hauled tons of cargo across the Pacific, is shaking. It isn't because of a break or a fracture. It's because his nervous system has been overloaded. He has just experienced a total system failure, and the man who caused it is currently offering him a way back up. Miller takes the hand. It is a slow, heavy movement. When he stands, he doesn't lunge. He doesn't swing. The rage that was there 2 minutes ago has been replaced by a hollow, haunting curiosity. He looks at his own wrist, then at Bruce's forearm. He is looking for wires. He is looking for a hidden blade. He is looking for anything that explains how a man who weighs 150 pounds soaking wet just turned his own 230-pound frame into a falling tree. "You used a trick," Miller says, his voice finally returning, though it's an octave higher than before. "You did something to my nerves. That's not a fight. In a real fight, I'd have smashed your ribs before you grabbed me." Bruce doesn't smile. He doesn't need to. He simply looks at Miller and asks a single question that silences the room again. "Why didn't you?" The question hangs there, heavier than the jasmine tea and the tobacco smoke. Why didn't he? Miller had the size. He had the reach. He had the intent. But in that 1 second, the gap between intent and action was swallowed by someone who moved without the burden of ego. Bruce explains it to the room, not as a teacher lecturing students, but as a scientist explaining a law of nature. He tells them that Miller's strength was his greatest weakness. Because Miller wanted to crush, he had to tense. Because he tensed, he became a solid object. And a solid object is easy to move if you know where the center is. Bruce's grip wasn't a move in the traditional sense. It was an interception. He didn't wait for the fight to start. He ended the fight at the moment of contact. Then comes the moment that truly defines the night. One of the older men, a teacher of a traditional style, steps out of the shadows. He is thin, dressed in a sharp suit, and his eyes are narrowed with a lifetime of skepticism. He tells Bruce that anyone can drop a longshoreman with a nerve trick, but it wouldn't work against a trained hand. He challenges Bruce to do it again, but this time against someone who knows how to resist. The stakes have just doubled. It's one thing to humble a street brawler in a social club. It's another thing entirely to challenge the hierarchy of Chinatown's martial elite. If Bruce fails now, he's a fraud. If he succeeds, he's a target. Bruce accepts, but he adds a condition. He won't use the grip this time. He tells the old man to put his hand on Bruce's chest. "Push me," Bruce says. "Push me out of the room." The old man smiles. He knows about structure. He knows about rooting. He places his palm against Bruce's black t-shirt, settles his weight, and prepares to launch the younger man across the floor. The crowd holds its breath. This is the classic test of power. But as the old man begins to exert force, something happens that defies every rule in their books. Bruce doesn't resist the push. He doesn't brace his feet. He becomes like a shadow. For every ounce of pressure the old man applies, Bruce's body seems to absorb it and redirect it into the floor. It's as if the old man is trying to push a ghost. And then, in that same 1 second that has become the theme of the night, Bruce's chest seems to expand. It isn't a pushback. It's a pulse, a sudden violent vibration of energy that travels from Bruce's feet through his spine and out through his sternum. The old man is sent stumbling back 5 feet, his heels clicking against the wood until he hits a chair. The room is no longer calling it cheating. They are calling it impossible. Bruce looks at the room, his expression still almost bored, and tells them that the secret isn't in the muscle. It's in the release. He tells them that most people spend their entire lives fighting themselves. They fight their own tension, their own fears, their own need to be seen as strong. Miller lost because he was trying to be a mountain. The old man lost because he was trying to be a hammer. Bruce won because he was willing to be nothing. As the night winds down, the hostility in the room begins to evaporate, replaced by a cold, hard respect. Miller is the first to leave. He doesn't say goodbye. He just walks out into the San Francisco fog, rubbing his wrist, a changed man. He would go back to the docks the next day, and he would still be the biggest man there, but he would never look at a smaller man the same way again. He had learned that the loudest noise usually comes from the emptiest vessel. Bruce stays for a while, answering questions that are now asked with a quiet humility. He doesn't hold a grudge against the man who called him a fancy dancer. He doesn't demand an apology from the man who called him a cheat. He understands that people only lash out when they are afraid of losing what they think they know. When Bruce finally steps out of the social club and into the cool night air of 1964 San Francisco, he isn't thinking about the win. He's thinking about the work. He's thinking about how to make that 1 second even shorter. He's thinking about a style that has no style, a way that has no way. That night was the end of Miller's ego, but it was the beginning of a legend. The stories of what happened in that back room would spread through the city, then through the country, and eventually through the world. They would call it the one-inch punch or the intercepting fist, but those were just labels. The truth was simpler. It was the moment a man stopped fighting and started flowing. Who are you subestimating because they don't make enough noise? Where in your life are you confusing loud aggression with actual strength? Are you, like Miller, becoming a prisoner of your own tension, holding on to a grip on life so tightly that you've become easy to topple? When you finally win your own battles, when you find yourself standing over the person or the problem that tried to shove you, will you use that moment to destroy them? Or will you be like the man in the black t-shirt, reaching down to help them up, showing them that there is a better way to exist? Real power doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to prove itself with a display of cruelty. Real power is the ability to end a conflict in a single second and then use the next second to offer peace. Miller walked away with a bruised wrist, but he left with a clear mind. And Bruce, he walked away with nothing to prove, because he knew that the greatest victory isn't over an opponent. It's over the version of yourself that thought you needed an opponent in the first place.